Hey everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we have 4 ISTJs discussing stereotypes. And so Samuel, would you like to tell us a bit about you?
Hi everyone, I'm Samuel. I'm type 1 wing 9, studying MBTI for 5 years.
Awesome. And Chanté?
Hi, my name is Chante. My Enneagram type is 1 as well. And I know a little bit about types, but I'm not very well versed. I'm still learning, so.
That's totally okay. Nice to have you here. And Debbie?
Hi, my name's Debbie. I'm from the UK. I'm an ISTJ. I sometimes feel a bit out of my depth in this sort of discussion, but I enjoy discussing type and how I can learn more about myself.
Awesome. And Ryan?
Hey, I'm Ryan. I'm a personality blogger. Me and my partner Mara. We've been studying type for a good long time now, and I'm glad to be on.
Excellent. And so Ryan has a website called PracticalTyping, which I'll link below. You should all check it out. He has really practical and very useful information on the 16 personality types. So yes, PracticalTyping is linked down below. Go check it out, guys. And so ISTJ stereotypes. My first stereotype I'd like to ask you guys about is tradition. To what extent is it true and to what extent is it false that ISTJs care about tradition?
Well, in my case, I would say that generally speaking, I like traditions. I see that it's a good way to convey meaning to other people. For example, when we have a marriage proposal, that posture of the man offering the ring, you know what that thing means. So when you are doing this, you are sort of incorporating that role and you are saying something. So generally speaking, I like so much about tradition.
For me, I love tradition. For example, growing up all my life, we've had like a family reunion every other year, and we always have it at the same place. But I know that it's been like a discussion to like try to change it, but I never liked the idea of like changing the tradition of like where it has always been, because the whole point is that like our family has like kind of came from this place, and so we want to go back to our roots. So I don't know, tradition has always been like something that I like, and it makes me feel comfortable, especially if it's a tradition that I like and I want to keep that going to, I guess, try to get that same, I don't know, energy or high from that experience. Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah, I think they give me structure and just help me plan life around them, because with traditions, you know where you were and you know where you're coming from, and with that you can change and you can adapt. But I do appreciate the structure and and knowing where we've come from, I guess.
So I guess I have a little bit of a different relationship with tradition than the typical ISTJ, I guess you would say. I actually don't really do any of the traditions that I grew up with, actually. So they're fine. I mean, I enjoy going and celebrating certain holidays or whatever with my family and all that, but that's not something that I actually personally took with me when I left. I basically have kind of started doing my own things with the holidays or whatever else. And I mean, I do think that there is something to the traditions in the sense that SI likes what it likes, if that makes any sense. So what I mean by that is that when SI finds something that it really enjoys, it has this tendency to go that anything that doesn't either meet or exceed that expectation will become a disappointment. So in a certain way, that's kind of one way how traditions are formed, right? So you have this idea of whatever it was and you really enjoyed it, and that is going to give you the desire to repeat it again. So if it's something that you liked, or like on the holidays or whatever, it's like, I love chocolate chip cookies. So it'll become a part of my tradition when Christmas rolls around that there has to be chocolate chip cookies or it's not Christmas or something like that, because that's something that SI has kind of singled out. It's like, that is something that I really enjoy, and the experience may fall flat if something like that isn't incorporated into it. So, like I said, though, I didn't really take a lot of, my mother's very traditional. She's an ISFJ, and she had very, very structured holidays. But I didn't take a lot of that structure with me. I kind of preferred things to be a little bit more laid back myself. So in that sense, I'm not traditional because I'm not kind of taking those same exact traditions that I grew up with me. But on the other hand, I am kind of developing and taking like the things that I did like and then incorporating them into the future for myself.
Great thoughts, everyone. And so the takeaway I got from this was that SI likes to recreate like sensations that it has liked in the past and then bring them back. But it doesn't have to necessarily be tradition. It can just be a particular experience for how you like certain things to be, like how you like your eggs to be cooked a certain way, or like so. And if they don't reach that like perfect experience, it can be kind of disappointing. And so that's really, really cool.
What I believe tradition is a way to, because SI is an introverted function. So it's hard to communicate what SI perceives about reality. And tradition gives us the way to make, even though that information is kind of strongly related to the subject, we can share it. It's like a trick to make something that is necessarily ours to be not just ours, but shared with the community.
For sure, Samuel. It's like bringing this experience that meant a lot to you, and then like making sure it has a place in the future too. And so like bringing that to other people as well. So that's really cool. And so my next question for you all is, a stereotype of SI is that it's past oriented. There is truth to this, but I think it's like overblown. So what are your thoughts on how the type community sees SI as past oriented? Does it ring true? Does it not ring true? Which parts are true?
So this is something that's actually one of my pet peeves when it comes to people when they're talking about type. SI is past oriented, but only in the sense of it looks to the past for what works. It's not stuck in the past. It's not constantly looking to the past, and it's not living there. The only thing that SI is going to do is it's going to pull on your past experiences, what you've learned, what you've experienced, and go, how can I implement this to the future? In that way, kind of SI and NI actually are kind of aligned, although NI does something a little bit different, but they're both looking toward how are they going to use whatever information they have to figure out how to do it in the future is basically essentially what it's doing. So when they say that SI is stuck in the past, they're kind of discounting the whole idea of SI, really, because it's really more about what can I take from the past so I don't repeat the mistakes, and how can I take what worked and implement it so I can continue to have success.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Ryan. It's using the experiences of the past to plan for the future, so we don't make the same mistakes and we build upon what's gone before.
They tend to not see SI as a process. Generally, when they speak about SI, it's generally about just remembering things. Like if it was just a copy, you store copies of the reality. They don't see as processing something. So that's generally why they tend to see that we just live in the past, because it's not talked about how we use the past information to build understandings and then guide what we'll do in the future.
I see SI as it's taking from the past to perfect a tried and true type of experience they had. So it's like, you know, this is tried and true, and it works in the past. So you're able to take that and then bring it to now or the future, so you can reincorporate your experience that has worked and then to bring it back.
Generally, when I see, it's not that it's just because it's safe and tried and true. Of course, there's an element about it. If it was tried and true, we'll be more open to see what they have to say. But it's because generally, when something is completely new, all that is the idea, is the concept. So we don't know what's there, because we are we care about the sensing, the reality. So we have to take information of the reality. If something doesn't have any source of information of the properties or how the things will really be, we can't process anything. We can't see if that thing, even though it's a good idea, but how it will work in reality is more about a lack of information that I perceive with new things.
I see. Yeah. SI, it'll go back to its experiences because that gives them a better barometer for how reality functions. And so they use that to like gauge reality, because it's like SI is a realistic function. And so that's how it understands reality. Or like, maybe that's what I was getting.
Yes.
Well, I mean, SI is dealing with the sensory, right? So you're dealing with kind of whatever your subjective impression of the outside world is. I mean, it's kind of goes back to my logic on it a lot of the time is if they've been doing it this way for the past 20 years, there is probably a reason why they've been doing it this way for the past 20 years. And if I looked hard enough, I could probably figure out and tell you the reasons why, but it might just be quicker to just do what they've been doing for the past 20 years. It's not that I'm not open to change or doing something better, but a lot of the times people come at you with, I think that this would work better, and that doesn't really cut it for me personally. I don't want you to just tell me what you think is going to work better. I want you to show me that it is better. I want you to prove it to me. Show me practically in the real world why what you're saying works better than what they've been doing for the past 20 years. Because your good idea is nothing more than an idea until you bring it down into reality and implement it.
Yes. So SI, it's like you know that something is dependable. If it's been working for 20 years, it probably does work, you know? And so, yes, totally true. And so, Chanté, do you have any thoughts on this?
I agree with what everyone is saying. Like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And if there is a different way, I do want to see how it actually works, because if we're using it in the real world, then it needs to work in the real world. And so I wouldn't want to do something that wouldn't, like, that's just an idea and it won't actually work, if that makes sense. So
yeah. You make sure people have their feet on the ground and are not all airy-fairy in the land.
Right. So I'm open to trying new things, but I want to know that it will work, and that it's practical.
Yeah.
So
that's super important. And so, Debbie, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's just making sure that you don't throw away things that are working well. And, you know, we are, as an ISTJ, I am open to change. I'm not inflexible. I think I'm flexible and progressive in my thinking. But if somebody comes up with a better idea, I'm wanting them to show some evidence that this is better, rather than just on a whim.
Awesome. Those are really great thoughts. ISTJs, they want to make sure you, like, honor the things that worked in the past if they did work, and they're open to change, but they don't want to like just accept something that may just completely fall on its face. That brings us to our next stereotype, that ISTJs aren't open to change. What are your thoughts on this?
I quite like change, actually, and I quite like planning change and organizing change. I guess it gives me an opportunity to look at I said, look at what's gone in the past. Tradition is important. The past is important. But to be able to look at improvements in how to make things work and understand why and try and explain that to myself and other people. So, yes, I you know, I'm not impervious to change. And in some ways, I quite like planning the change.
Would you say, Debbie, that you kind of consider it more like you prefer change in a controlled way? So, you know, the Enneagrams, they kind of like everything going everywhere, kind of chaotic, crazy. They like all the activity. But
yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I'm quite critical of people who who just create activity for the sake of creating activity, actually. Yeah. And if somebody comes with an idea, let's try doing it this way. I want to know why. I'm quite happy to do things a different way, but as long as I know why people are thinking it, and just the idea, it may be let's try something different. I'll say, why is this an improvement? But quite happy to listen to other people's ideas.
So basically, more like for me personally, I don't prefer change just for the sake of change, especially when it comes to something that has to do with productivity. If you're going to change something in the way that productivity is being implemented, I want to know why you're changing it first and foremost. Like, is there a reason? Are you just bored, or is there actually a good reason why you want to change the process? Is it actually going to improve it? And then in addition to that, I'm going to, if they're trying to introduce something like completely separate from the process that exists, I'll go, well, can you improve the process that's already in place to make it match what you're saying or exceed it? Because it's far easier to leave the current process in place than to try to completely scrap it and bring in a completely new process. Because I feel like what a lot of people don't realize a lot of times, especially like in like industry or business or whatever, they get this big idea, but then they don't seem to factor in the costs in like changing everything. It's like you realize if you're going to completely change this, there's going to be costs involved with like retraining people, getting new equipment. Your new process is coming with a cost. Change just doesn't happen. There's always something attached with the change. So at the end of the day, when you look at the numbers, you could, yes, maybe your new system is more efficient, but you just spent $100,000 implementing it. So any kind of efficiency gains that would have saved you money or whatever it is may have just been eaten up in the cost of changing everything. And at that point, it was more or less wasted effort because you're not net gaining anything. You net zero or net negative because of the change.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah, to be honest, generally I don't like changes because I don't like the feeling that I will do something that necessarily sometime after it will fade. I want to do something that will last. So generally, what I like to do are some things that I could make it be the best that they can be. But with typology, I've been learning that not always this is a good approach, and changes are necessary, and we have to learn when changes are necessary.
For the most part, I don't like change, and it's because like once I know how to do something, it's like it's easy and it's comfortable. Like at my job, like they're trying to change a whole bunch of stuff with like management and like different processes, and I hate it. And I resist it so hard because it's just like it doesn't make sense. Like, why are we changing it? We already had a process that worked, which is what we were just talking about before. Like if it works, don't change it. And so it's just kind of annoying because then I have to like learn something all over again. And I just don't really enjoy that. I like to be able to know what I'm doing and be the best at it. And so if something changes, then I have to like, again, learn it all over again. And I just don't like it. And then if you're talking about changes as far as like Like I had like a couple friends from my church and everything that are like leaving, like moving and going different places, and that's different. And I'm like, I hate change. Like, why do you guys have to leave and like start a life somewhere else? You know what I mean? Because I'm someone who, it's hard for me to make real genuine connections. So when I do, like I want to hold on to them and I don't want anything to change. So when it does change in that sense where they have to leave or, you know, something happens like that, it's like, man, it really sucks. Now I'm starting from a point zero again to try to like find people who I can like be around or create connections with in a way that is meaningful. So, yeah. But then there are times where I will feel like spontaneous and I will be open to change, but it just depends on what it is and like how I'm feeling in the moment. So
I guess you could say in a certain sense that ISTJs kind of have, it's almost like the effort's front loaded for ISTJs. It's really hard to just get on board with something that you have no experience with, and then pretty much after you've gotten that bulk out of the way, that's when we get to the point where we're refining and making ourselves more efficient and more productive. So anytime that there's any kind of major change involved, it's like you're really kind of crippling, at least me, it really kind of cripples me when you go throw away everything that you've been doing and look at this new thing that you've never done before, and this is how we're doing it now. Like I've struggled with that at work in my industry, where they will want to enact like these large scale changes, and that's kind of why I went on the whole rant that I went on earlier. That basically they want to implement a large scale change, and then it basically affects all of these things. And I'm over here looking at everything that it affects. And I'm like, did you think this through the whole way before you decided that you were going to do this? You realize the amount of effort and time and the things that have to be changed because you want to switch this one thing. It's like, do you really need to switch that? Because you do realize that you're going to have to throw away all the other material. You're going to have to retrain everyone. You're going to have to get all of the departments on board with this new system. You're going to have to implement it in the other branches, in the different states, to keep it all uniform. You're going to have to do all of this stuff. It's like, this is not this little insignificant thing that you are making it out to be. There are long-reaching consequences to what you're trying to do. But I don't know if that has to do with SI's kind of, and this is kind of why I say SI is a little more future-oriented, because I look at something like that and I'm like, I'm seeing everything rolling out to the future and how it is going to affect everything for the next 5 months as you're trying to make this all work because you just had to change it.
Yes. Yeah. I think what SI is asking itself is this justifiable in the long term? If there's a change, is this justifiable in the long term? And if it doesn't see that, like, it's not justifiable, then why change it? Because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, because we generally will feel responsible to make things run smoothly. So when the changes comes, other types, they will notice that there's some value to those changes, and even though very important value for those changes, but there will be a lot of problems that we will be the first one to notice and spend our energy trying to solve those problems.
Yeah, and it can be little things as well. It's like Facebook is changing, and it keeps changing into this new thing, and I keep changing back. And then they tell me at the end of September, I won't be able to change back. And I think, why do they do that?
I hate that. I don't even like update my I have an iPhone, and all the new iOS updates, I never update it because I hate the changes. It's always like something to get used to, or like they do something that I don't like. So yeah, usually I stick to what I have.
And that way I'm not like that. Like, I actually like the updates and the changes, but I guess it probably has to do with the fact that kind of technology is a little bit of a hobby of mine. So I kind of like to see what they do and how they change it. I mean, obviously sometimes I don't like the changes because I think the changes they implemented were dumb. But as a whole, I kind of like how technology evolves, and I like to see how it improves. So there might be a little bit of variance depending on like what your hobbies are and like how into it you are, kind of thing. I think there's a lot of stigma attached to like things that are changing that you just want to work. If that makes any sense. It's like if it's not like an interest or a hobby of yours, the change in it is just an annoyance at that point because you knew how it worked and you just want it to work. But if it's like an interest, then it's like, oh, well, that's interesting. They changed that or this, and then you get all into it and you're like, oh, well, that's cool that they did that. So the phone thing I don't technically relate to, but like I said, I think that has more to do with the fact that I'm kind of into it. I kind of swap out my phone more than some other people do just because I guess that's one of the ways that my Inferior Ne comes out. That's kind of my little hobby that I kind of switch out my phones because I get bored of them or they don't work quite the way I want them to. And I see something else. I'm like, oh, I bet that would work better or that would make me more productive. Or I think that one fits my needs better or has better battery life, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I noticed that like SI, when it has like a possible negative experience with something and it's also not an interest or like something that they really care about, then they'll try to like avoid that negative experience because you can live without that negative experience. But if it's something that you see that is cool to have like you're okay with that change because it's something that, you know, brings some novelty to your NE and you're like, you know, or something you care about, then you're more likely to tolerate that change or like to like that change. And it all depends on that person. But the continuous theme is that SI is very particular when it is something that it cares about, or like, so Ryan, there is a story about eggs that Mara told me about how you like your eggs a certain way. And so SI will have these little quirks, like the things that it likes in a particular way. Like my dad likes to read the newspaper at a certain time, at a certain day, and he likes to relax in a certain way when he gets home. And so like, you'll notice with SI users, they'll have different routines that they like, but each one, it depends on the SI user. And so my next stereotype is routines. What are your thoughts on routines? How much is it true and how much could it be a little bit adjusted, people's understanding of it?
Well, it's very easy to maintain a habit. Like, for example, we and my friend, we were planning to start to learn French this year, 2020. He was not an SJ, but we made that promise. Okay, when it is January 1st, we'll start to learn French. I have never thought about learning French at a deep level, but since January 1st, I'm still learning French until today. I'm keeping it through the whole year, even though not every day I'm willing to do it to start to learn, but it's easy because you see that for some things, the progress will come with the implementations. And as long as you can see that the progress is coming, it's more easier to see the reason to maintain the routines.
I like routines. I mean, it's pretty much, I've done it all my life. But interestingly enough, since like coronavirus and I've been home, like working from home, I have no routine at all. And it's actually kind of nice because I don't have to like make sure I'm ready for the week or whatever. Like I used to meal prep. I was doing that for the past 3 years, and then once Corona hit, I haven't even done that since I've been home. I just kind of like, oh, what's in here to eat, or I just snack on something random. But yeah, like for the most part, I guess if I have somewhere to be or like things like going on, I do like to have that routine in place. So I know like, okay, I have this to do today, and you just check it off the list. But in this environment right now, I'm kind of loving the non-routine.
I like my routines. I think it enables me to be creative with parts of my brain, set aside that to be creative and try different things, as long as other things I can put into routine and do them without having to think about it. It makes life easier with the routine because you can. It would just that part of my life just runs. If I do it differently, then I have to think about that, and it takes away from being creative in other areas.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I probably have routine. It's just not in the traditional sense. Like I don't have a I do this at this time, do this at this time, this kind of thing. Just between the nature of my job and just the way it is. Like I get up in the morning at the same time every day, but that's just kind of what you have to do to go to work, right? But being in construction, it kind of makes you have to not have a routine because it's kind of feels like it's constantly changing and you have to constantly adapt to what's going on around you. So that's kind of affected me a little bit as far as my routine goes. I generally leave my schedule open for the most part. My goal usually is to, how can I get everything done that I need done as fast as humanly possible to leave as much open free time as I can. That's kind of how I manage my time. I mean, I know that's kind of a weird way to do it, I guess, especially for an ISTJ. It's a little not the norm, but I guess it just all has to go back to what you value, right? So I kind of put free time as my highest priority. So everything kind of revolves around making that the most amount as I can have.
That's really cool, Ryan. I know an ISTJ in my life that's also like you. He's like an unconventional one. So I would say like a lot of ISTJs do value routine and that there's a lot to it because it's like bringing what in the past has worked into the present. But there are also like some ISTJs who they're kind of like quirky in the sense that they're like I have this goal where I want to like have as much free time as possible, and then they'll start to structure everything around this, and then it's like creating SI consistency in building a life that can afford for that free time. So SI has different ways of creating consistency. Some create consistency through routines, and some create consistency through creating a consistent way to make free time in their life. And so I still think like SI has some sort of way to create the best consistent conditions for whatever they want to do. So that's really, really awesome. And
yeah, don't get me wrong. Everything I do is pretty consistent. Like my life isn't necessarily all over the place. It's just my goal is free time, so that leaves a lot of my schedule open for things to not necessarily be consistent within that free time, but everything surrounding it is pretty consistent because I've figured out basically how to streamline getting everything done that I need to get done so I can have the open time.
Yeah, I really respect you for that. And so it reminds me of something Personality Hacker says about SI. They say that SI is the least flexible in the short term, but the most flexible in the long term out of all types. So what they mean by this is that SI, if it's a certain abrupt change that is unwarranted and like there's no reason behind it, SI may resist it the most. But over time, if SI learns why it's important to have that change or why it's beneficial to have this change, SI is the most adaptable in the long term because they can figure out the most consistent way to achieve that type of thing that, you know, is worth keeping. So that's really cool, everyone. My next stereotype I'd like to talk about is SI isn't future oriented, or that SI users aren't future oriented. What are your thoughts on that?
So Ryan already said something about the relationship with SI and the future. From my perspective is that when we see the future, we see the necessity of some things because we don't value NI. So generally, at least in my case, I don't tend to rely that the future will be a very certain path. To say that I know that can be, but I don't tend to think that I'll find it. So the future isn't certain. Everything can happen. All the possibilities can turn and come to my life. So I just wanted to maintain some resources that are generally important to me. Then whatever it happens in the future, I'll be prepared, at least in the most of the cases.
Yeah, I understand exactly, Samuel. It's looking to be prepared, and when you say, you know, we're not future oriented, you know, it's looking at planning and structure and how we can actually plan for the future, and that fires me up. That does.
I heard before that the main differences between the ISTJ and the INTJ when it comes to planning is that the INTJ, they will plan the possibilities. They will align the concepts and the paths so that whatever they do, they will have the most possibility to get success. They believe that they will find the path in the future. But the ISTJ, they plan to cut off the bad possibilities because I believe that I don't think that I need to plan that much for the good, just for the bad. When the good comes, I will just enjoy it.
So yeah, like I said earlier, I think it's completely ridiculous when people are sitting there saying that SI is not future oriented. I mean, I kind of mentioned this in the other panel that I was in, I think, but like by the time I was 16, I knew that I wanted to be a master electrician as soon as humanly possible. So from that point, I basically figured out and planned out, it's like, okay, well, I got 4 years of schooling to do. I have to get the 4 years of experience. I have to find a place to work so I can get the experience. How am I going to go about that? Where am I going to go to school at? How soon can I get in? Can I do night school while I'm still doing high school to get those two things going at the same time? What are the processes that I have to deal with? What governmental legislations and dealing with government is terrible. I just wanted to throw that out there as a side note. It is just a pain in the butt to deal with the paperwork and the people and the bureaucracy in government. That's if I would say one thing as an ISTJ that I would love to change, it would be a lot of stuff in government would be something that I'd like to change and simplify. But I digress. Anyways, but yeah, it just had to do with I laid that all out, and then once I figured out the path forward, I just started implementing it. I'm like, okay, well, this is where I go to night school. This is where I can find a job, which that was a complete pain at the time because we were going through the recession here in the States right around the time that I was going into the labor force. So it was lots and lots and lots of phone calls and driving around different places and staking out supply houses and waiting for electrical contractors to show up and asking around and seeing who needed help and work and working for pennies at the beginning. But yeah, it was all for the future though. I was looking toward, okay, well, if I get all my experience in, if I can start at 18, that means if I do the 4 years of schooling and the 4 years of work, I can get my master's license by the age of the earliest 22. And I got pretty close to doing that. I think it was more around 23 when I ended up doing it because, you know, there's always hiccups. Nothing ever turns out perfectly. That's one thing I've been learning, just, you know, as life keeps throwing things your way. But you want to work as perfectly as you possibly can, though, and you try to. The inferior NE basically makes you go, what can go wrong, and how can I mitigate it before it happens? At least that's the way it works for me. I am trying to look at all the different things. It's like, okay, well, this person's not calling me back. I guess I'm going to have to be that person that calls them every single day to get them to do their job because they don't want to do their job so that I can get what I need. And I mean, that was all part of the process. That was part of just getting to that end goal.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ryan. And it also brings us back to Samuel's point. So you guys talked about how SI is really good at mitigating things that could go wrong. So it's almost like pointing out the weak spots and wanting to prevent those weak spots from happening. So Samuel contrasted that with NI, whereas NI is less focused on mitigating the negatives and more focused on momentum towards that. So that could be a possible difference. I don't know yet. That's a hypothesis. And so the next stereotype on deck. So ISTJs aren't funny. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I think I'm hilarious. People tell me I'm funny, so I don't know about that. But I think for the most part, though, like it's not like I try to make jokes, but I am just realistic and I just say whatever comes to my mind, and somehow people find it funny. But yeah. So I wouldn't say like I'm a stand-up comedian, but I think my personality, like I say things and it kind of catches people off guard and they laugh at it.
I think it depends probably on the relationship with the ISTJ. I think you get some of that from people that only have a strictly working relationship with one, maybe. Like typically, if you're only on that working level with an ISTJ, they're end up usually being kind of no nonsense. I just want what I need from you, and then I'm going to go back to what I was doing so I can get it done, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, if you can get past that kind of relationship, and like you be friendly to them, you kind of get a little bit more of a rapport, then you start seeing a little bit of that dry humor, get a little bit more snark out of them, kind of thing. I mean, that's typically how it's worked with me. A lot of my coworkers, it was almost kind of like a warming up process, right? I heard from multiple coworkers down the road, it's like, when I first met you, I really thought that you were a big pain in the butt that just had no personality, and you were just very, very rigid, and you didn't really, you didn't hang out with people, you didn't participate in conversations. But it's been 6 months, and I don't know what happened, but I mean, you're cool now. It's like, but yeah, when we first met you, it was kind of a little rocky.
Yeah, I think it's very. You mentioned dry humor there, right? Dry irony, pointing out the ridiculous things in life with a very straight face, and then taking great delight in looking around and then seeing people who got it, that was being ironic at that point, and then smiling at the people who didn't. So in some ways, it can be my sense of humor does come out, but it's also quite an internal thing as well. My sense of humor is often directed at myself to try and make myself laugh without actually physically laughing.
And so, Debbie, you mentioned something really interesting. What I noticed about ISTJs is that sometimes they'll say a joke, but sometimes it was intended to amuse themselves. So they'll say something funny, but sometimes it's so for their own amusement too. So I noticed that about like FI users. Sometimes FI users, or just I noticed it with my ISTJ dad, is that he'll say something because it's humorous to him, and then like it's so like he'll point out something ridiculous. Like that is like so ridiculous that's happening, and like he'll point out why it's ridiculous and he'll laugh to himself about it, and I'm like like that's pretty funny. Yeah, so ISTJs are really funny. Like there's this like witty, sardonic, it's like, did you really just say that? Like it was so straightforwardly funny. It was like dang, that is really brutally honest, and its brutalness also makes it funny. So there's that. So that's cool that you mentioned that, Debbie. And so Samuel?
Yeah, I'll just say that generally I don't think I am a funny person. It's not my natural tendency. But at college, I knew that if I was spending time with introversion, I will get some problems. I have to deal with people and be more open. So I tried for years to be more funny. Did I get it? I have no idea, but I tried.
That's lovely. Okay, so I love all your perspectives. So yes, ISTJs, they need some warming up time, but when you get to like their true self, they can be kind of really hilarious. So don't underestimate how funny your ISTJ could be. But sometimes like their humor comes from pointing out the nonsense in what's happening. So it's pretty funny. The next possible thing that I'd like to talk about that's normally attributed to ISTJs is like ISTJs are rule followers, or they always follow rules. Is this true? Is this false? To what extent is it true?
It's kind of is, but it isn't. Kind of one of those things. It's if the rule makes sense and it's there for a good reason, yes. I'll follow the rules because I mean it's there for a reason. But stupid rules or people just being dumb or difficult and making rules that reflect that, no.
Yeah,
I tend to ignore those.
Naturally, I tend to follow rules because I think that if I made what was expected, the things will run more easy. So they have no problem. But yeah, it's something that could be a bit dangerous, because if you follow very strictly, some rules can give power to wrong people. So we have to be aware of this. It's something that I've been learning and trying to be more conscious about.
So I follow rules if it is for a good reason, or like if I feel like, oh, this can result in me getting in trouble if I don't follow the rule, then I'll follow the rule. But if there's no consequence attached to it, then I kind of leave it up to my own interpretation if I want to follow that or not, like if it makes sense. But yeah, it depends on, yeah, if there's a consequence attached to it or not. But I do find that I try to enforce rules for others. If if it is like a rule that makes sense, but like, yeah, otherwise it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I guess you picked on something really quite important thing there, Chante. It's about the consequence. I'll follow them if there is reason and there is consequence. I'll follow them. If there's one or the other, I may follow them. But if there's neither reason nor consequence, then why bother? So I would make a conscious decision to ignore the rule. It wouldn't be by default. I'd say, well, there's no reason to follow this, and there's no consequence for not following it. So I'd then make a conscious decision not to.
Yeah, it's not like the stereotype. A lot of stereotypes of the ISTJ like to make it out that the ISTJ just basically blindly follows rules. It's like, no, I think about the rule and I make a determination on it for myself. I have a brain. I know how to do critical thinking. I know how to weigh pros and cons, consequences, whether it makes sense. And those are the things that are playing into it. And it's not just a blind following of the rules.
That's a lot of truth said in this session. And so, Chanté, you mentioned a really interesting point about how, like you said that you do enforce a rule when you do see that it is a good rule. And so I noticed that about TE users, like how to spot if someone might be TE is like if someone is enforcing like order in a logical way on other people or in their environment, it's a sign of possible TE like being used. So that's a really good point. And so, yeah. And so very interesting points made. What I got out of it was that, there are some ISTJs who are rule followers and they do kind of do that, but they normally they think about it before they follow the rule. And so you'll also have the quirky ISTJs that, if they see that the rule should be circumvented because it's not that good, they'll also circumvent it. Like, for instance, my dad, he's been working as a tow truck person for a while. He's an ISTJ. And he sees some of the rules as redundant. And he's like, this rule is kind of not worth following. And so over time, he's worked there for such a long time. He knows exactly how to circumvent it. My dad does adhere to things when they make sense, but when they don't, he'll also, I know SI is told they won't circumvent rules, but my dad totally does, because he's like, hey, this kind of stupid, I know this way would work better. And so he just does his own way. and so SI users can totally break the rules too.
I do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as long as it's not like a safety rule at work, if somebody put a procedure together and it doesn't make sense, I'll modify the procedure to make it make more sense or to make it better, faster.
Absolutely. So that makes total sense. And yeah, also aligns with my dad too. And so any other stereotypes you guys would like to tackle before we close up the panel? Any other points?
Yeah, actually I have one. So a lot of places get these two things mixed up. They will say that ISTJs fear the future. I do not fear the future. I fear the unknown. So if there's too much unknown, it makes me take a step back or makes me kind of walk away from it. But it's not that I will never face the unknown. It's that I will want to make the unknown known before proceeding. So Inferior Ne is not a fear of the future, it is a fear of the unknown. It's a fear of not knowing what's to come. And the SI, typically what happens if you're healthy and you're not in the grip of any or whatever else, is that'll spur the SI to basically go, okay, well, there's too much unknown. What can I do to shed some light on the unknown to make it so that I do know what's going on? There's not a resistance to learning new things. There's not a resistance to change so much as there is a resistance to going into something blind.
Yeah, something that I usually don't like is, even though it's not wrong, but I don't like the word about SI. They tend to see that SI is very focused on details. I don't like the word details, because generally I understand that details are things that are not as important, but SI is trying to know reality. It's like, I don't want to hinder my perception searching meaning in the reality. So I want things to be concrete. I want to learn from the universe more than I can conceive. But I still don't want, but okay, I want things to be concrete. But even though it's introverted function, I don't want to know how things are concrete now, because these things will change. I want to know more than this. I want to know something transcendent that will not change through time. So SI is more about collecting the information that we had already saw in the past, and they will tangle it to make meaning. In this process of arranging information, concrete information, will be very subjective, and this will be the understanding of the SI of the reality. So is a process, is not something that, like knowing just an object. I already had heard that someone was giving a tip for sensors to develop their intuition, and the person said that we could see movies that will make us think. So why we are thinking, but we're not thinking about the concepts, but the concrete parts of reality. It's more like that. I would like to see more when it is spoke about aside the understandings, not just remember things, better memory, but there's understanding there.
Yes, Samuel. And so SI, it kind of compiles like sensory information that is known and that you can count on. And so that you can use that in the future or now. Yeah, that's so true. Like you're kind of superimposing all the times that the sensory has made sense or it has worked, and you're keeping that. And so for safe use. And yeah, and it goes back to Ryan's point where he says that like inferior Ne is fear of the unknown. So SI is like the opposite. So it's like, it's finding what is known and what you can rely on. And so that's really cool.
Samuel's point was actually kind of interesting, because I guess it's kind of something that people kind of don't think about sometimes, but SI is subjective, right? It's an introverted function. So even though it's dealing with concrete sensory, our interpretation of the concrete sensory is still going to be subjective. It's going to be at the whim of our personal experiences, how we interpreted it, stuff like that. So, I mean, that's why you get variance. Like even within all types, there's variance, because everybody's personalized experiences, because everybody has introverted functions, are different. So you end up drawing different conclusions from your own subjective information. So a lot of people look at SI and go, well, you all are just pulling in all the same sensory details and you're all coming to the same boring conclusions because you all took in the same concrete and you're not thinking about anything abstract, or you're not having any independent ideas or interpretations of anything. And that's not really the case. That's not how SI works. SI is still subjective in the sense that you are compiling your own personal storehouse of information, experiences, takeaways. Because I mean, that I know takeaways is something that is a lot used with NI, but not so much with SI. But I mean, there's still technically SI takeaways from something. If you've seen something happen so many times and you've experienced that same, say, I consistently experience a bad experience at a restaurant, I am going to get a takeaway that that restaurant isn't any good. But that might not necessarily be the case for everyone. Other people obviously still go to that restaurant and they had a good experience there. So it's my subjective experience that that restaurant is bad. It's not necessarily the objective fact that that is a bad restaurant. It's just my personal experience with that restaurant was negative.
Yes, and that's a really good point, Ryan. So in the book that I'm writing right now, what I'm calling NI and SI together, like they have shared qualities, and one of them is they store outcomes. And so, you know, SI has its takeaways and NI has its takeaways. I see it as like NI, the takeaways that it takes is like the underlying meaning instead of the thing itself, whereas the SI takeaways is more the actual thing itself and the experience itself. But they're both takeaway functions, like taking away the gold nugget or whatever you saw as pertinent. And so any other stereotypes you guys would like to tackle before we close off the panel?
Anybody here in accounting? Any of you?
No.
No. I didn't think so.
I thought about it, but I became a teacher.
Yeah, the most stereotypes are very, very similar to what you were saying before, generally speaking. Like, generally SI is described as having a good memory and being good at it already knows. So there is not so much about SI in the community. It's more the same thing.
Yeah.
How clean is each of yours houses? That's another stereotype. It's not that my house is dirty.
My room is a mess, to be honest. My room is a mess, to be honest. I'm not showing you now, but it is a mess.
But do you know where everything is, Samuel?
Of course, all the time.
I think it's that level of organization that sometimes there can be a stereotype that we've got everything in its place and everything, all the books are on the bookshelf in Dewey Decimal order. And that's not the case, but I do know where everything is and I do know where I can find anything, because if I can't, I get really disturbed and feel awkward about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like it has to do more with general order rather than like super specific order. Like if something leaves its zone, it can be bad. Like if a tool gets out of the area where I store my tools and never makes it back, that might become a problem just simply because it's not where I have known it to be. And that kind of stuff is irritating. So that will compel me to have a certain amount of order, right? So it's like I have all of this stuff here. It's not necessarily that I perfectly lined everything up and have it all label makered and everything else, but it is all where I know it to be, kind of thing.
Yeah, I like organization. I like to see places that are very well organized. It gives me pleasure to see it, but not always the energy spent to make my room clean is good enough to make me organize it.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I definitely feel you on that. It's like that is always the goal, right? To have the super pristine organization, but sometimes putting the effort into making it that way isn't always necessarily worth it.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, is it worth it to the SI user to have a clean room? If it's not worth it, then the room might not be clean, but if it is worth it, it will be clean. So it's all about that subjective valuing of, is it worth it? Cool. And
Yeah.
so and so Chanté.
I mean, I'm not very organized, or at least my room, but like if it has to do with like work or like when I was in school and stuff, I keep that stuff pretty organized so I know like where to look and stuff. Or like if someone is asking me to do something for them, like I keep it pretty organized. But when it just comes to my own space, I just kind of do whatever I feel like it. Yeah.
Yeah, so stereotype busted.
Well, yeah. So if you think about it, it kind of boils down to what do you value, right? So what you're seeing from us is that if it's something that we value or it's something that's important, or if it's going to get in the way if it's not organized, that's when you see that organization probably come out. It's going to be if I don't have this organized, it's going to cause me issues, or it's going to slow me down, or it's going to cause me some kind of stress. But I mean, if it's just your living area and you just want to be comfortable and you don't necessarily want to have to make everything perfect all the time, then it's not necessarily going to extend into your living situation all the time. I mean, there might be some ISTJs that value a pristine living condition, or that might be something that they're into, or they're into minimalism, or they're into something aesthetic wise, like they have a room set up just so, and it makes them happy to see that room look that way. Then maybe you might see that kind of creep into there, but it's kind of like what's important to you. Kind of we'll get a little bit of that tertiary FI into there, right? It's like what is important to me, and what is going to motivate me to put forth the effort to make it that way.
For me, like, I don't see a point in making my bed because it's just going to get messed up again. So I just don't make it. I mean, sometimes I might feel compelled to do it, but it's not something that I do often because I'm like, well, I just got out of bed and I'm going to go to work and I'm going to come back and get back in my bed. So, I mean, like, the time that, I leave my bed to come back, like, nothing substantial is going to happen where I need to make my bed. So
it's like if it makes sense, then you will clean it. If it doesn't, you won't. Simple as that. Mm-hmm. And so any other stereotypes you notice about your type?
There's a stereotype basically that ISTJs don't make assumptions. That's not true. I mean, if I can avoid making an assumption, I will. But I mean, life is just life. And in life, you kind of have to make assumptions sometimes because just the information just isn't always there. And it's going to be impractical to just sit there and not do anything until you can get the clarity on it. So sometimes you do have to make the assumptions. So that's wrong. Yeah. ISTJs do make assumptions.
Yeah, I think I make assumptions all the time.
You could speak about us being thinkers in relationship with emotions, that we will be cold all the time, but our feeling function is tertiary. So if you spend some energy in a fight, we'll get a real good understanding of what we value. But I believe that we share with a lot of times that the stereotype will be very, very cold.
So I have a question for the rest of you. I already know what my stance on it is, but how do you all feel about taking on responsibilities? Is that something that you guys like and are readily go to do, or is that something that you do not like?
When it comes to work in groups, if I have the authority, if I can really manage people, I'll be okay with that. The problem is when I take the lead, which unfortunately happens a lot of times. I don't know why, even though I'm introvert, but I'll ask for someone to do something and they just can't. Nah, I'm not gonna do it. But I don't like to take responsibilities in these situations because if I fight with them, won't solve anything. But if I had the authority, then everything will be amazing.
I think I used to a lot more. Nowadays, though, I don't think I do. And then I think it really depends on, do I know what's happening? If I know what's happening and I feel like I'm the most knowledgeable, then sure, absolutely, I'll take that responsibility because I want it to be done in a certain way. But if it's something that I'm not too well versed on, or I just feel like I don't have the energy to want to manage, then I will step aside, especially like in more recent years. I find like after grad school, I was just like, I'm done. Like that was just so much work. And I'm like, listen, I don't have the energy anymore. So whatever y'all want to do, y'all do it. I'll let somebody else handle it. Y'all just tell me what y'all want me to do, and I'll do it to the best of my ability.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Chante. It's like ISTJs, although they can be responsible. It's like all about energy management too. It's like, is this worth my energy to do? And if it's not, then why?
I'm
But
learning
if
that
it
a lot.
is,
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I take on quite a lot of responsibilities in work and other places, but there's two questions that I always say is, you know, do I have the skills and knowledge and experience to do this? And also, is there anybody else around who could perhaps do the role better? If the answer to the first question is yes, and the answer to the second question is no, I have no problem about taking responsibility. Where I struggle is when, you know, I am quite self-critical, and if I felt that you know, others could do this better than me, and I'm a bit of a fraud in here, I don't take it on for, you know, it's very much a service. It's serving other people to actually do that, because it's something I'm good at, and I can do it, rather than just taking on a leadership role because, you know, I have a desperate need to lead. I don't. But if there's something which I think I'm good at and I'm knowledgeable about, and there's other people around and not so, then yeah, I'll take the responsibility.
My take on it is I hate it. I hate taking on more responsibility.
Very strange.
Like,
it feels very strange when. Okay, go on, Ryan. I'll say it later.
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm good with the responsibility that I have, and I don't have any problems with maintaining the responsibilities I have. Right? It's like that's not an issue. Like I've learned to deal with those responsibilities and be responsible for those things. But it's like, it just feels like a lot of the times it's like when you take on a responsibility, it's like now it's yours for forever and you can't get rid of it. And I'm like, I don't want it. Like, I have other things that I need to be doing. I don't want this responsibility. Is there anybody else that can take this responsibility? Now, to Debbie's point, I can't stand incompetence in leadership, though. That drives me up a wall. So there are certain situations where it's like I will see incompetence in somebody else fulfilling a responsibility, and it really is jarring, and it'll kind of make me want to, like, can I just do it, because you're really bugging me with the way that you're doing this, and it's not good. But in most cases, I would much rather be in like a secondary role, like where I could like basically advise somebody else.
Yes.
Like, you take the responsibility and I'll tell you how to do it, because I can help you. I can help you be better. But then I don't have to worry about it ultimately in the end. But I can give you sagely advice or whatever it may be to help you along your path. But you can keep the responsibility, really. I don't need it. I don't want it. I don't have any interest in it.
That's me. That is me. That's so me.
Yeah, of course. We just don't want to spend our time with extroverting all the time. We need to go back and observe things, relax, and stay in tune with our introverted functions.
Just to add on to that, the other problem I have with responsibility is I hate having to deal with people that don't want to do what you tell them to do. It's like, that just drives me insane too. It's like, I'm not interested in trying to force somebody to do something or force them to do it right. It's like, if you put me in a position of leadership, it's like, look, you're going to have to get one thing straight right from the get-go. It's like, if I'm in this position, everybody's just going to have to listen and do what I'm telling them to do, because I'm not interested in fighting with everybody. It's like, if you're going to put me in charge, I'm in charge. Like, period. End of story. It's like, there's not going to be any of this arguing. There's not going to be any of this, I'm telling you to do a task and you don't do it. It's like, if that's the way it's going to be, then forget it. Because I don't have the energy just don't have the energy to like stay on top of people all the time and make sure that they're doing things or doing it right or doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's like, I'm not interested in that. It's like, if everybody can do their part and work autonomously, and that's great. But it's like that whole management thing is it's just a pain.
Yeah, that's so true. So personality hacker, they say that EJs are fixated on management. So it's not the IJs, it's not the ISTJs who are like always managing people. That's exhausting, as an introvert. And so that's a really good point. And so any other stereotypes before we end the panel? Anything else that grinds your gears?
Another thing that I kind of find interesting is that some people kind of get it in their heads that ISTJs are going to kind of be like married to their workplace, or like just basically completely devoted to it, kind of have like the workaholic thing or whatever. It's like that's not me. Like they might be out there, but that is not the kind of ISTJ I am. It's like work serves its utility and its purpose, and it brings me in the money that I need to survive. But it's like, if you were trying to get me to do something for free and just be dedicated to the workplace as a whole, just because that's what you're supposed to do, like, no, I got other things going on. I got my own life. I'm not interested in being here 24 hours a day or doing work from home for free or anything like that. I'm good.
Yeah, I clock in and clock out. Like, don't hit me up 5 minutes to go and you want me to do something. No, I'm sorry. I'm done for the day. And I heard this a lot, like, since working from home, a lot of people are spending more time. I'm like, how do you do that? Because I'm off immediately, because I just, like he said, I'm not doing no free work. Y'all pay me X amount and that's what it is. And so I'll get to whatever it is the next day. And that's one of my things too about like being a business owner. I don't want to do that for myself because I feel like that's more time and energy than just, going somewhere for nine to 5 or whatever like that. Like that might be like your ambition or whatever, but it's not mine. I personally don't want to do more than what I need to. And I definitely want to have like a work-life balance. My job affords me that right now, which I appreciate. And so I wouldn't dream about taking a position or, starting a business that would potentially cause me not to be able to have that flexibility. So.
That is hilarious how people think that. They think that they're going to start their own business and that's going to give them more freedom.
Yeah.
Like that is... It is the complete opposite. Trust me, I've seen it happen. I've seen other people do it. It's like you go from working a 40-hour week to working a 100-plus-hour week, and you're not only doing your job, now you're doing like 5 other jobs as well, because it's like being a business owner is not being whatever you were before.
Yeah.
If I'm an electrician, if I become a business owner, I'm not technically just an electrician anymore. I'm a business owner. I'm a manager. I'm a accountant. If you don't hire people to fill those roles, guess who's got to do it? You got to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's exactly right. If you start your own business, you're not getting more freedom. You're most of the time getting less freedom. Well, less free time, I guess. I mean, I guess you are afforded more freedom just because you get to make the choices, but it's less free time for sure.
I don't need necessarily to make those choices. Like if I know what I need to do and you say, okay, this is your role and this is what you need to do, I'm like, great, cool. I know what I need to do and I'll do it. Like my aunt, she's a business owner. She's been doing it for about 20 something years. And she says to me, like, if I don't work, I don't get paid. And I'm like, So basically, she's having to work a lot more, whereas I get PTO time, I get sick time or whatever the case. I can go on vacations, but for her, she has to cut her vacation short because if she doesn't go to work, she doesn't get paid. And her business is successful. It's been around for like 20 something years. But the nature of her work, she's a hairstylist, you know, she has her own clients, and, you know, she'll make money off of like people who work for her, but, you know, she only gets a percentage of that, since, you know, they also, as workers, get their own money as well. So,
and even when they are not working, generally they are thinking about the work and how to make things better. So they don't really have the time to completely relax 100%. That's why I admire these people so much. I've met an ENTJ in college. She was amazing. Her grades were perfect, but she had to do so much work to get those grades and other projects that I got tired just to hear about what she did. So, okay, girl, you're amazing. Go for it. I'll stay here and relax. Congratulations for you.
Yeah, so the theme here is like ISTJs care about energy conservation. It's important.
Yeah, so a lead in for that is, that's kind of another stereotype, is people assume that ISTJs are not lazy or are never lazy. And I mean, that one's kind of like it's a yes and a no, right? It's technically the whole idea of me trying to maximize the amount of free time I have is kind of a lazy goal, in the sense that it's like, it's allowing me to be lazy if I want to be lazy. So, I mean, obviously there's the part of it that you're dedicated to making it happen. So in that sense, you're not lazy. But I mean, I like sitting around and lounging around on a Saturday. And if I don't have anything to do, that's honestly, that's great. I like to relax.
Yeah, it's interesting. So a word associated with SI is homeostasis. So it's like, yeah, ISTJs like to have that relaxation time to, you know, feel that comfort, or not even comfort. It's like feeling like how to have like a good, stable lifestyle, like just to like so that can cause like a laziness. So they're not lazy about creating a lazy life.
So, I mean, what it is for me is, I like things because of the nature that at least the people around me tell me that I'm a high stress individual. So because of that, how you counteract that, right, is you make a calm environment. If you're high stress, you're going to want a calm environment. You know, it's just kind of like there's not a lot there to stress you out. There's not sudden changes. There's not things that are going to hit you out of the blue. That's another thing. I'm not really a fan of surprises. Like, not even really surprise parties, honestly. Like, I would just rather not be surprised, generally speaking, unless it's like one of those one-off, like, pleasant surprises. Like, I was expecting something to be bad and then it ended up being good, so it surprised me because it was better than I thought it was going to be. But that aside, surprises, I'm not really a fan. I mean, other people may have different perspectives on that, but for me personally. So yeah, like, I try to make my environment like kind of calm, relaxing environment, so that there's not things that I have to think about. There's not things that I have to worry about, because that inferior NE sometimes can get in there, and it's like you're thinking about 100 different things all the time. And sometimes you're just like, I just need to shut it off. I need to be somewhere that I don't have to worry about something not being right. And that's kind of the environment that I try to make for myself.
And yes, Ryan, that is a really good point. So this is my theory. I think the love language of ISTJs is like, if they like a certain thing a particular way, or if you know a way to help minimize surprises for them, like it's a really nice thing for them. Like I know an ISTJ dad, he likes, like, when he comes home from a long day of work and he opens the fridge and like everything is misplaced and he can't find the item that he's looking for that he wanted, right? It's kind of like, it irritates him. And so a way to show love to an ISTJ is like to make their life less difficult, to make their NE like go less in spiraling down worst case scenarios. Like, just minimize surprises for them. If you know they like something a certain way, like do it that certain way. If they like the floors a certain way, I don't know, depending on the ISTJ, they can value different things. But yeah, like that's a way to show love to your ISTJ. And so any other points on this topic?
Yeah. If I'm not wrong, Daryl Nari, when he was talking about some ISTJs, he said that in our case, our brain receives information of our body all the time. It's not like other types. All the time, the information of our body comes to our mind and giving us information to how we are and how the world is. So when the environment is comfortable, we can relax and try to and get again to process our understandings of reality and even get to the SIFI loop if it's possible. The sleep, you have more energy to perfect some things.
That is so true. And so thank you, ISTJs, for debunking these stereotypes and to shed light on the true ISTJ mindset. You guys really bring a lot of light and a lot of like real information about ISTJs. Like apart from all the misinformation, like you're providing a well of true, real, down to earth information on the personality type that is ISTJ. And basically, this is a great service to the world. You're helping correct people's information about the type, and like thank you so much for that. Thank you for your genuine thoughts, your personal experiences, all of the ISTJ takeaways that you had. I don't know, it's nice to know all these things about the intricate workings of your mind. Like I feel closer to you as people by knowing how your mind works. So thank you for allowing me to see that look into your mind's eye. Your cognition is really interesting and very valuable to the world, and I really appreciate it. Yeah,
Thank you,
yeah.
Joyce.
And you guys are amazing. I can't say, like, I can't uptalk you guys enough, because y'all are like, you know, when things, like you can bring something like a past experience into the now or the future to make to make the scenario better. And so like that's so valuable, because you keep the things that work that other people accidentally throw away too soon, and you're like, hey, wait, you're too quick with throwing this away. And so like thank you for being like the voice of reason and like keeping things that worked in society. Otherwise we would be a flaming hot mess. So thank you. Like I appreciate ISTJs. They're awesome, and you guys are fantastic, and you add a very valuable part into society. And by the way, everyone, Ryan has a website called PracticalTyping, and he writes with an ISTP, and basically they're very good articles on type and typology, and you would be at a loss if you don't go visit that website. Like it's a fantastic. So like if you want to enrich your life, you know, like if you want to better your life or your knowledge of typology, go check out PracticalTyping. Ryan writes there, and it's awesome. Can't recommend it enough. And so, yeah, thank you, ISTJs, for coming out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And thank you,
Joyce.
audience members, for watching. You guys are awesome, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye, y'all.